to drag Sam out kicking and screaming.
I had to listen all the way home about how awesome and fun it was. So yes, it
Okay.
would take a while to agree to leave.
We're ready.
Awesome, I can't wait.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll call the Crow Wing County August 21st, 2020 Budget Committee to order. And with that, one quick note, Commissioner Hoag is absent. He's running his business today. He's prepped himself. Nick, this is for you, that he may have some questions at some point, but he's unable to attend.
Okay.
So with that, I'll turn it over to Nick and Debbie, I would assume, are going to lead the charge.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For today, assuming
You want the presentation up?
yes, please.
Don't tell me the battery is dead. Is there a light?
Does everybody have copies?
Everybody in the room can if they want to get it up on the, off the thing here.
Pointer works, it's not the battery. You have
You want this one, Nick?
Listen,
that one
I
won't
can't.
work.
Well, here, I can run it.
Yeah, Teresa will just have to.
Okay.
To start with, we're going to go through some of our CARES Act and coronavirus relief funds, the internal cost allocation. We're going to cover kind of the payroll aspects and our internal costs that we've incurred so far. And then we'll review some of the requests that departments have right now for the use of these funds for different capital projects. We'll go through 4 different budget amendments for tax forfeited dollars. All 4 are for land services, and then we'll jump into our 2021 operational budget workshop, and then we can do a little bit of review of where we are so far through July, and then any other questions that we have when we're done. So next slide. So far, Finance has found an estimated $575,000 worth of payroll expenses that people have coded towards COVID-19. We're still working on reconciling this. There are multiple grants, particularly in community services, that are also utilizing some of these payroll expenses towards those grant dollars. So we're trying to reconcile between what they're all able to get. I know the sheltering grant, they just got notification this week that they are in for a 4th round of funding. So that impacts how much we can actually take towards CARES. At this point, there's a little over $222,000 that has been allocated to the human services grants that they have received. So the remainder of that $575 is most likely available for CARES, but we're still working through the guidance and everything else to make sure those all qualify. For current expenses for COVID-19, there's approximately $278,209 worth of expenses that we have found going through all of our accounts payable and our credit card statements. These range from everything from technology purchases to PPE to cleaning supplies across the entire organization. At this point, everything that's in there appears to qualify, so this is a portion that we'll probably bring to board asking for the authorization to transfer CARES dollars to offset these expenses. If you do want a full listing of everything, we can provide that. There's lots and lots of lines, so I didn't feel it was appropriate to bring it today. So with that, we also have a number of requested purchases for COVID-19 related expenses, and this is just a listing of what staff have provided so far. We do have a couple other submissions that are out there that we will have to look at yet too. There are a number of items in here. Some of these are very clear cut, whether guidance covers them or not. Others, there's some questionability. The deep cleaning, sanitizing jail kitchen floors for $1,250, that is specific to trying to mitigate the amount of risk that we have for contamination in the jail kitchen. So that appears to be directly related to COVID-19. It's something we're doing above and beyond what we normally would do. The video camera and production software purchase for IT for the entire county. We have been using personal equipment in order to create videos for internal projects or tours for new staffing. This is a request to buy our own equipment so that we can do that without using somebody's personal equipment. The sheriff, EOC, and conference room, they are looking to add an ITV station for both the Emergency Operations Center and the conference room to help us improve our communication with state and federal partners and help us better social distance by having everybody in an area where you have a camera that actually can get the entire room rather than individuals. The jail, the 4 ITV stations, this will allow them to do remote court hearings. Currently, they are borrowing an ITV setup to accomplish this. So this would be buying some specific for the jail so that they can continue this going forward, allowing members to, or inmates to attend court hearings from, I believe, their cell?
I'm Mr. Westbrook.
Are they in their cell when they do this?
They're within the confines of the jail, so they do not have to leave the jail area to do a hearing.
So Nick, or the sheriff, and is Don on the line too?
Yes.
So do we anticipate an increase usage of this even after the COVID stuff goes away?
From my perspective, I don't think that we're going to see a reduction in the amount of virtual appearances from people in custody. And there are conversations occurring right now where we're having people that are in prison appear virtually as well, or people that are in other counties, and other counties are requesting to be able to do the same, that we have them in custody and they have a different pending case. So I see that this is going to be something that's going to be for the long haul, personally.
Okay, thank you.
And to add on that, I think you can see in addition to that, right now we have a contract with Cass County. As Don mentioned, Cass County inmates are using the ITV system rather than be transported back and forth. As this progresses and part of the discussion coming up here in reference to what the jail's going to look like in the future, kind of my hope is exactly that, is having the ability of having a complex as big as ours, the capability as big as ours, and having ITV capability for outlining counties to not have to transport if they bring someone here to house would be a big plus. Example being, I'll just pick a county, say Itasca County. If we were to house for Itasca County and they could eliminate the transport part of it and do this virtually through ITV on both ends, the benefit for them would be not having that cost. The benefit for us would be maybe having some income come in.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the only thing I would caution against is we're not able to use these funds for projected future enhancements, if you will. It has to be related to how are we dealing with COVID-19. So for what is currently in place, yes, it's addressing those needs to not have to transport those prisoners who are here. We
Right.
can't project out saying that we may potentially get another contract in the future, so we want to be positioned for that. That's the one caveat that we have to keep in mind with any approval for these CARES Act funding, is it has to be specific to this pandemic.
So it comes down to what we're doing currently and what we have, and we don't want part of the message to be that it's going to address
Correct. It's all
future-
going to be about how we phrase it with what our documentation is of what we are purchasing these for. So we're purchasing them to deal with current existing court backlogs and court case hearings, as well as current inmates that are in our facility.
Okay.
Next on the list is a floor scrubber for the jail. They currently rely on inmates to do the sweeping, the scrubbing, and everything else of the floors. This would take it from a multi-inmate project down to one person being able to do all of the work. This is intended to help us improve our social distancing and minimize that contact you have between individuals.
So quick question to the sheriff. That would still be an inmate operating that piece of equipment?
Yes, but so to add a little bit more to the story on this, a little bit of the history on this, you know, the personnel, the inmates that we have in our jail that do a number of the day-to-day jobs, clothing, laundry, food, cleaning, historically have been our DOC inmates. And we've seen our Department of Correction inmates, and we've seen our DOC withdraw some of their inmates back to the state prisons. And with that, we've lost a great number of the people in our facility that can help with the cleaning,
So what I'm getting at is that we aren't looking at adding a county personnel to do that job. Okay.
Next on the list is $8,275 for medical equipment and supplies for our health clinic in the jail to provide triage and treatment. This is one that we have asked the jail to provide a little more insight into. At this point, looking at it, I don't necessarily know if it will qualify for COVID-19 funds, as it's not a direct tie to our response to COVID-19. It does give us some ability to triage faster and do some of those pieces quicker, but it's a little more information that we're gonna need from the jail to actually keep pushing this one forward. After that, we have $29,240 for 65 iPads for continuing education and training of our jail staff. This is one iPad for each individual. It does have a direct tie to COVID-19 because it does allow us to do telework as well as social distance. The only concern I have with this one is it's 65 bought all at one time, and that's going to be something that we're going to have to operationally replace again in the future. So it's just something to think about as we add this technology, as these will come back and have to be an operational expense in the future.
And it'll be all at one time, or at least in close proximity.
There'll need to be a transition plan that's worked into the operations budget on an ongoing basis, just like with any consumable technology, like our laptop replacements or anything else. And that would be the same for any technology-related items that are, you know, one-on-one devices. Like the next line is laptops for community services to allow for distance work, teleworking, which is fine, directly relates to COVID-19, is eligible for these funds for that initial outlay purchase, but we are just going to need to make sure departments are keeping in mind that they are going to have to build that replacement schedule into their operating budgets into the future.
And that covers the next line for community services of 45 additional laptops to allow for staff that are working remotely to work off of a county-owned asset rather than personal equipment, or being limited to being here in the building because that's the only computer technology that they actually have. Next on the list is video technology for courtroom 1 to allow for social distancing of jurors while conducting jury trials for $29,697. Again, this is directly related to COVID-19 in order to keep that social distancing and get the courts progressing forward. This would help us make progress with that. Audio and video equipment to support remote meeting capabilities in the admin conference room for $4,000. This is to allow us to hold remote meetings via where we can actually have 5 or 6 people in a room and be able to have a remote meeting rather than having everybody spaced everywhere else throughout the building and trying to run off teams and losing some of that benefit of being one-to-one with individuals. Webcams for all the desktop computers in both the jail and the sheriff's office for those that don't currently have them. For $2,698, this is directly for meetings and trainings to allow for that remote piece again. We have
Real quick,
3,000,
Nick,
go ahead.
if I can, in the future, when we purchase computers, they will have the camera, all that stuff in there?
Anytime we're purchasing laptops, they already have built-in and integrated webcams. It's not a standard thing on desktop PCs as such, but it would be something that we will look at standardizing as part of our package deal going forward in the future.
Okay. Our quick question then, why wouldn't we buy laptops with a station?
Depends on what the need of that particular PC is for. If you think about our engineers running AutoCAD, the laptop may be not the best option for that, depending on the size of the processor. You know, typically, it probably will become our standard to look at using laptops, purchasing laptops instead of desktops. You can usually get a little bit longer life cycle out of a desktop than you can out of a laptop, but we're going to be looking at that whole thing from start to finish now.
Okay.
Highway has requested $3,000 for signage and pavement markings to handle a change in traffic flows for, I don't remember which school it was.
Eagle.
Because of the changes to how schooling is going to work, it's going to impact the traffic flow there. So this is actually improving some of the communication to individuals to make sure we don't run into any crashes or other incidents there.
And this is out on County Road 11?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is why it's the highway department who's requesting the funds and for that particular purpose, because it is on a county road project and why it would qualify.
There is a little expenditure on there actually within the school grounds, but it affects the county highway or provide some striping in their parking lot to have them be able to stage appropriately so they don't back out onto County Road 11. It's actually going to be in your board package on Tuesday also, more information.
Okay.
And then finally on the list is controlled access for the courthouse for $31,100. This is to actually allow for control of each of the individual doors in this building so that we are able to lock up portions and then actually allow for somebody to push a buzzer and be let in, or for us to be able to have badge access to multiple doors rather than just this east door, including the tunnel between us and land services.
And this is COVID-related or operational?
This is specifically because of the pandemic that we're even looking at this as an option.
Okay.
Prior to this, we wouldn't have looked at controlling those doors. For a total of $263,338.68 thus far. There are a number of other requests that are out there that we will bring to you again on September 10th that I got in the last couple of days. Some of those are for actual vaccination clinics and a few other pieces, but we'll see those on September 10th.
So our intention is to bring you the list at Budget Committee, like today or on September 10th, with the requested purchases that have been received since the last Budget Committee, and then these would be placed on the next following county board meeting for your approval. These are items that have not been purchased yet and need executive authority in order to do so.
Okay. Understood.
And it's your decision if you want us to put them on consent, if they're discussed at Budget Committee and then placed on the consent calendar, or if you want them for discussion at the board meeting as a standing agenda item.
My preference is the consent agenda, because if we object, we should do it here and let the departments know that we object, so
Okay.
that would be my preference.
All right.
So if there are any of these items that you have objection to or want additional information or have questions on or want to have discussion on, today would be the day to do that, as they are slated to be on the agenda next week, I think.
I
No.
don't think they were put on.
Okay,
for
so they'll
this
be
week,
on
so
for the
they'll be
following board meeting, because this week is a later Budget Committee, yes.
Well, Nick, too, when it comes to the 65 iPads, 45 laptops, are we replacing all of them at one time, or?
All of these expenses have to be incurred by December 1st, so they will all occur over the next probably 2 months.
Commissioner Brecken, when we get to the replacement cycle in 5 years, if you will, with these items, we would look at how we would phase those out over a 3-year plan.
So Nick, you did bring up the one for the sheriff's department on the medical equipment for the triage and that. You'll be looking closer at that one before that's added to the list?
Yep, we've asked for
Make
more
sure.
information, and with what we have, we still don't have enough to justify it before an auditor, so we're still searching for a little more information on it.
Okay,
We have to find the right way to phrase it that it will be qualifying for CARES funding, if that's the way to put it.
okay.
Any other questions on that?
Board? Nope.
Okay. Next up is tax forfeited fund budget amendments. Land Services is requesting to utilize tax forfeited sales revenue from this year's tax forfeited sale. They are looking to add an additional picnic shelter at South Long Lake for $75,000, a shelter and display at the fire tower for $75,000. There's some trail updates at the fire tower for $35,000, and kiosks on the mountain bike trails for $8,000. We are utilizing the tax forfeited funds are items, or when we sell those funds, those properties, that funding is held here until the year end. Whatever we don't utilize gets distributed out between us, the school districts, and the townships and the cities that are impacted by those particular properties. So it is best for us, if we have a good use for these funds, to use them now so that we can pull that out of this portion. These are the four that they have. If do you have any questions, if Gary is on the line for each one of these.
So this is Commissioner Barrows, Gary, and my first question is on the second item on here, which is the shelter and display at the fire tower in Pequot. And as I sent some questions to you yesterday, and you said that, you know, the plan for these two items were on your original thought process. I guess, Gary, I can't endorse $75,000 for a second shelter there. The display to explain fire history, that I have no problem with, and if you wanted to put a couple benches up there for people to rest, like people like myself when I drag my tongue on the rock going up there, I don't see an issue with that, but to spend that kind of money for an additional shelter when we already have a beautiful one there, I see that as an expense that personally I can't support.
Sure. Mr. Chair, if I can, I will just say that it was an idea of having a second shelter with these like panels around it to kind of course, talk about fire prevention and the actual equipment that have evolved in the state of Minnesota over the years. It doesn't have to be a picnic shelter. It could be, you know, like a wall of, if you will, kiosks or plaques. But it will be a substantial investment to do a shelter with the panels, or if we wanted to do no shelter, yet do some kind of wall or little walkway with stations that would talk about different things. There's different options there, but it was just to kind of set the stage for what we want to do to an extent and then have further discussion. But it didn't have to necessarily be a picnic shelter, but hopefully that makes some sense.
Any other concerns? One other question, then I'm going to move on to the kiosk for the mountain bike trails. Why is the county doing those signs? I don't quite get the connection there.
Sure. We have in the past, a commissioner always put kiosks with a 3-panel display. We did about 2 or 3 years ago with every trail that we sponsor or maintain. So whether they're at our county parks or ATV trails, we have a motorcycle off-road trail, our ski trails that we have groomed in the past, which are double as a hunter-hiker trail. Other than the rest of those hunter-hiker trails, they all have a 3-panel kiosk that not only has the actual trail map of the trail you're at, but it has our countywide, it kind of promotes our countywide trails. So we have all of those on as a form of promotion on where the other trails that the county sponsors or maintains. And this is a system that, while yes, it's mountain bike trails and it's in conjunction mainly with the Cuyuna Rec Center that is maintained by the state of Minnesota, or DNR. On the ex-forfeited land, this was specific trails that we sponsored. That's just an additional, I can't remember how many miles of dirt bike trails. We as staff thought it was a good way to promote more, not only these trails, but the rest of the trails that we have to offer in the county. But we definitely don't have to do them. But that's just kind of keeping our consistent theme, as we thought was a good idea to do.
And then maybe you could just talk a little bit about, you talk about upgrading those trails going back to the Pequot Fire Tower. Tell us a little bit about what the design is or what you're proposing.
Sure, I apologize, I don't believe I have a trail map today to show you. But if you've been out there, we have two main trails, one that goes directly up to the fire tower, another one that loops around the current 40 that we have, that we call the wildlife loop. Another trail, we have enough space to actually create another trail that would be on the backside of the fire tower and loop into the wildlife loop trail that would create another, about 0.8 or 0.9 mile of granite chip trail. We've gotten some tremendous feedback on how folks have really enjoyed the trails. So the idea was we could actually enhance the property already with another trail.
And I think that was the original plan, was to kind of build out or enhance the trails so that people could have that experience there. And when you say the backside, you're talking to the east or kind of northeast?
Yeah, the trail would start directly south of where the fire tower exists now and loop, yes, around on the east side of the fire tower and loop back in on the north side of the fire tower where the at an intersection with the current wildlife loop trail.
So I'm not quite understanding here, Gary. When you said, you would start at the fire tower and go east and then north, you'd be right back to that trail in no time because County Road 11 runs to the south there. So did you mean that you're going to go west and then north?
Am I talking east? Oh, I apologize. We would be on the west, we'd be starting on the south of the tower. It'd actually go west towards Pequot. Geez, I apologize. I got my compass is all messed up here. And then it would loop to the north and then kind of come back a little bit to the east to run into the wildlife loop trail.
Okay.
I do apologize. Hopefully that makes more sense.
Yep. Any other concerns, questions for Gary? You do have a compass in your car, Gary?
I do. I should use it.
Okay, thank you.
So of these 4 items, these will have to come before the full board. Are there any items that we want to leave off for now, or do you want to bring them all and have a discussion there, or consent?
I don't want consent because I object to the shelter. So that one will, you can put the whole list separate, and then we'll talk about if there are additional concerns at that time.
All right, well, that's what we'll plan to do. Before we move into budget, there's one more thing on CARES that I want to update you on. So far, we did open up the application period for the for-profit and nonprofit businesses and organizations here on Monday. Thus far, we have 59 small business applications already received and 5 nonprofit. Tyler from Bladek said it is a fairly steady flow of new applications coming in. For Kim from United Way, she stated that we can probably expect that most of theirs will be in later. She has received a lot of calls with questions, but she said traditionally they're kind of late to actually put their applications in, so we could probably expect theirs to jump more towards the end. So far, most have asked for the entire amount. There's only one that they could recall that actually asked for less, and they were around $4,000 that they were asking for. So far, most have asked for $10,000. So next is budget.
That application period is open until September
18th?
18th, I believe.
September 18th. Yep.
Before you here is what our current budget says we need for levy request for 2021. We are currently sitting at a 10.79% levy increase, which is $4.24 million. Additional levy requested at this point. There are a lot of driving factors that play into this. We did lose $1.727 million worth of revenue in our 2021 budget. Of that, we have a reduction of VRBO revenue from our planned 200,000 down to 60, so we're losing $140,000 in revenue in land services for that portion. The jail, due to the Department of Corrections contract being up, we will lose approximately $969,438 in revenue in the sheriff's office. They did increase their revenue from out-of-county holds by $22,000, offset a little bit of this, but it's still a substantial hit. We're also anticipating a $305,000 reduction in our investment income. There are a couple of reasons for this. One is the market has really dropped. We do utilize CDs, so anything that is currently sitting in a CD has still played around that 2% range for returns. But everything in our money market account is at about a 0.2% interest. So we actually did choose to take some of our CDs when they matured and move those over to our money market to help us with our cash flow during the beginning of the year next year. And without putting that in, we're going from that 2% down to that 0.2. So we're sitting at about $305,000 estimated loss in investment income. We also, in facilities, are seeing our rental income drop. We have a tenant that left out of the second floor in community services. That was about $37,000 there. We also, talking with Brainerd, will be reducing the contract revenue from them by $30,000 as well, based on the reduced amount of hours that they've requested from us. So that's a $67,000 drop in revenue from facilities. And then in community services, we are seeing a $268,000 reduction in revenues, mostly related to grants that are ending this year. There were 3 or 4 that Teresa listed off that will be ending this year that we don't anticipate to get next year. So for a total of 1.7 million reduction in revenue, which is actually an impact of it requires us to increase levy 4.39% just to offset those revenue losses. So moving into the individual areas, governance services is asking for a 13.9% increase to their levy request, which is about $544,000. The main driver behind this is staffing. The attorney did allocate or have approved in their 2020 budget for a position that was only budgeted for half the year. So that's a built-in increase to our levy request for next year because we have to budget for the full year now. They also did ask for an additional staff member over there as well. Between those two and the regular increases, they are a little over $360,000 of the $544,000 increase in levy need there.
Say that number again?
A little over $360,000 increase in their request. For administrative services, the primary driver is still salaries and wages there. It is only a 3% increase or $153,000. Facilities did a phenomenal job of going through their budget and really bringing their budget in line with what actuals are, as did IT. As far as the other admin portions, all of us run right on with where we expect to be. So everybody is being true with their budget in admin services. That gets us the ability to be at that 3% request there. For public safety services, there you see that it's a 23.5% increase request, or $2.411 million. There are a number of factors that play into this. Part of that is the additional staffing that we will see in the next slide. Let me pull up the other piece here so I can go through everything. Come here. We also see increases to computer and equipment software and furniture and other equipment. There is a substantial increase for body cams, a body cam server, some vests, as well as a K9. We are adding an evidence tech. We are adding, taking 6 positions in the courts that are currently in a part-time pool and transitioning those to a full-time position. We also are seeing the impacts of all those revenue losses in their side as well. Those revenue losses did not have a corresponding impact to the expenses. There were no reductions to the expenses because of that, so we are taking the full brunt of that $969,000 loss into levy in order to maintain operations. And that is everything that is driving Sheriff's Office. For land services, you see a 16.1% increase request, or $444,000. Obviously, the percentage skews that a little bit when you look at the dollar amounts because their request or their original levy is much smaller than others. The primary driver there is still staffing, as well as that investment income actually spreads across every one of these last departments we've been talking about. They've also increased their, what was their other increase here? We did some transfers of interest from the trust fund between different areas. So if you look at individual pieces of the land services, it skews that a little bit. But we also have that revenue loss impact there too, as well as the addition of the staff position you just recently added. And that has a net impact on salaries of about $320,000. And those are the primary drivers there. For debt service, we're asking for a 14.6% increase. Again, percentages skew this one. It is a $12,000 increase. This is statutorily required for us to levy 110% of what our bond payment is. This is getting us in line with where our bond payments are. And then for highway and for capital projects, we held the levies at the original amount that they had for 2020. Highway services, eventually we will have to start looking at bringing their levy up, as those funds allow us to pay for our local roads that aren't covered by state aid, but we still are in a position where we can keep them at zero for this coming budget year. Capital projects, we do have $1.7 million budgeted for revenue there from levy. This is also funded with CPA dollars from the state. So we are looking at different options of what we can do there to help us build fund balance in that area. We're looking at reducing our CIP expense to accomplish that.
You skipped community services.
Did I skip? I did. We'll get back to community services. I skipped that one.
I was going to ask you about that, so
Yep.
thank you.
So there are options for us there. We do have it programmed for the full 1.7 to stay in there, as that fund balance was below zero at one point this year. So in order to get that back to our $2 million minimum, we felt that it was important for us to keep that levy dollars assigned there. Jumping back up to community services, there is a 5% increase to their levy request, or $675,000. The primary driver for them is salaries and wages. There were ups and downs in different areas as far as revenue and expenses, but the net turned out to be a primary driver of salaries and wages. This does still have $800,000 programmed in for fund balance build for 2021, as that was another area that we were really struggling with fund balance. If you remember from the audit, we only had I think it was 0.2 months worth of fund balance in that area. This is helping us rebuild that so that we can actually survive those first 6 months of expenses with our fund balance. This entire plan also includes $200,000 of general fund balance build. That hits the governance services, admin, public safety, and land services. Again, we're below our minimums as recommended by the state, so this is trying to get us back to the position where we have the funding to flow through those first 6 months. Are there any questions on any of those? We have every SMT member available to answer questions, so.
I would assume that there will be additional meetings concerning this. I look at, and I'll just say this to the sheriff, that to put that many personnel on there is going to take quite a bit of justification, so from my perspective, I will expect some long discussions about that.
Teresa, will you show up the next slide there? The next slide that we have is the new positions that are included in the 21 budget, and we're asking each of the SMT members to speak today towards those new positions that they have requested.
Okay, so should we start with Don then?
We could start with
Mr.
that.
Ryan, you have a new legal assistant listed in the 21 budget.
I do, and actually, it's not necessarily new in the sense that it's never been asked for before. That was part of the budget proposal I submitted last year and agreed to forego that position until the 2021 budget, which is why it's back in there for the 2021 budget. The levy impact of that position is basically zero. With the number, which I put in the explanation that I provided to Nick, with the number of people that we've had either retire or because of COVID-19 decide to part ways with our office, and being able to bring fill those positions at a lesser wage, we save enough money so that the levy impact for the 2021 budget over 2020 will be zero by the adding of that position at the rate, beginning rate for a legal assistant. And again, the stuff that I submitted to Nick also outlines the purpose behind doing that. It's to fill out the rest of our new team concept so that we have different teams specializing not only at the attorney position, but also at the legal assistant position, which creates efficiencies, allows us to carry heavier caseloads than we would otherwise. And with having teams rather than individuals, we create our own backups for vacations and everything as well.
Okay, thank you.
As of right now, based on the way the budget module works, this is programmed in as a full levy impact. We have to take existing staffing and roll that forward into the future year. We do calculate in those that we know are retiring or will retire and try and back that out. But as this is a new position, it may be offset by the savings we get in retirements, but it is currently set up to show the full impact of the levy.
And that's because we don't have a retirement in hand.
We have some of the retirements in hand, but the way the budget module works is it takes current positions, we can manipulate some of it and actually reduce that, but it's going to show this as a brand new position separate from what's impacted there.
Okay.
Do you want to move on to community services and talk about their two new positions?
Yep, move to the next one.
Our new positions are, we anticipate to be not a non-levy impact. We believe we'll be able to bring in revenue through the work to be able to support the two positions. These positions will be for the developmentally disabled caseloads and the min-choices assessments, both of which we've seen the case numbers climb. We have not asked for new staff in this area. You might remember way back, because it was so memorable, in 2013, the Min-Choices program started, and rather than ask for new staff, we moved staff from different areas into the Min-Choices work, just because we didn't know what all the work would entail. And as we've worked through Min-Choices, we've been able to determine a system that works best for both the clients and the staff, but also to draw down revenue. And the current structure that we have in place now does not draw down the revenue that we anticipate we could. So we want to do some shifting of caseloads and moving around of assessments, and because when we know better, we do better, right? So now that we know more, we want to shift things around and be able to draw down additional dollars. We are unable to do that with the staffing complement that we have, and we've already pulled staff from other areas, and we don't have staff to be able to shift into this work. So in addition to that, we've gotten some mandates from DHS that we have to do in relation to county of where they're staying as opposed to who they're assigned to. if that makes sense. So if Crow Wing has someone staying in Dakota County, for example, Dakota County will be responsible for the reassessments. And so they need to have staff on board to be able to do those assessments. Same thing applies to Crow Wing. When other counties have their people staying here, we're responsible to do those assessments and reassessments. So asking for these 2 additional staff will help not only with the caseload increases, but with drawing down more revenue.
So with those 2 positions, the dollars come into the county and a portion of it is for their salaries? Is that what you're saying?
So we plan on getting SSTS, which is a system reimbursement. We're pulling in the assessor positions. We have them around 87,000. Now that's on the higher end of hiring because that's how we're told to budget, is to plan for the highest pay. We'd bring in, we believe, them at a cheaper wage, but we're going with the highest. We'd bring in SSTS reimbursement of around 33,000, waiver case management of around 70,000 for the state, and then federal waiver case management dollars around 70,000. So those monies would be paid, yes, to us. If that makes sense. It's really complicated, and I've brought experts with me who can speak better to the situation if you have further questions.
I don't know that I have further questions. Any of the commissioners?
Bottom line, no levy impact.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is jail, but we're going to skip quick since Sheriff can probably talk to all of those. We'll talk about the systems manager for land services. That is an item that you guys already approved. That is that new position for the management, or I don't even know what it's truly for, but it's a systems manager over there. So this is just showing that full amount in here because that was not a budget position, so it's new into the 2021 budget. So with that, that leaves us with the jail and the sheriff's office for the remainder.
And I'm not sure how in-depth in the weeds that you mentioned, obviously, we're gonna have some future discussions coming up, but just a quick rundown. Similar to what Mr. Ryan mentioned, the positions that we have, the admin tech records and the jail sergeant were both benched from 2020 and put out till 2021. The court deputy positions that are listed there, those are all current employees under the classification of part-time, so we moved them from part-time to full-time.
I can hear him.
Could you please have them come to the mic
Oh,
so I can
if
get
you'll
them
come
on
to the
camera?
mic, we want to record everything you say, Sheriff.
Absolutely.
I've normally got a booming voice, and I never questioned about not being loud enough, but absolutely. So to go through them, and we'll just run through them from the top here. The one listed under jail, new sergeant, that was similar to what Mr. Ryan mentioned earlier. The jail sergeant and the next one down, the admin tech records position, were both discussed during the 2020 budget and benched until the 2021 budget, obviously, so that's where they're coming from. The court deputy ones, those are current employees. They're under the classification currently of part-time, and it would be moving them from part-time to full-time. Capturing that, obviously, the expense that comes with that is the not only the wage, because they're currently working under the realm of receiving full benefits, so the benefits coming into that is what obviously pushes that number up. I'm not certain at this point, you mentioned we're going to have future meetings on it, of how much into the weeds you want to go, but I look forward to presenting, and I guess question I had as we were going through today was exactly that. What format do we see for discussions and for meetings moving this on? One other thing that I'd like to share, and just to give you guys a little bit of history and backdrop of what we're doing with COVID right now, and why I'm very reluctant to look at withdrawing what I've sent forward so far, is we are under complete new rules related to COVID and how it's affected us. And the jail is probably the most dramatic and the most obvious system and the place that we can see it. If we look at our court systems, historically looking back roughly 5 years, we were just under 20,000 cases a year that were going through our courts. And it slowly ticked up. Imagine a couple thousand, as we built throughout the years.
This year, we're well, and when I got this information, as I said, I certainly wouldn't share exact numbers, so just to ballpark this, we are well below 10,000. There's at least 2,000 pending cases. And our jail population, if you look back to the number of years, DOC was a great part of it. You know, we had as high as 70, 80 Department of Corrections inmates that we were housing. This last year, I think if we average it out, you're looking at about 20, 21, 23. We just sent a number of them back. We're down to 10 or 11 currently that we have DOC. And the writing was on the wall, and that's why we brought forward. The writing was on the wall that the Department of Corrections contract, I wouldn't say necessarily is ending. It's just they have space. They've released a great number of inmates. They're going to take back what they can to, to have some cost savings there. Now, moving that forward, what do we see? Well, we know we've got 2,000 cases pending. We are basically at what I would say max capacity with our COVID standards that we have in the jail right now. This morning, we were at 100 inmates, 100 even. And moving that forward, we can hold 286. If every star aligns, we can hold 286 inmates. It'll never happen because you have to have the right amount of certain offenses, what they're in for, whether they're male, they're female, what type of medical standards they have, et cetera. But we were operating at very high numbers. We're looking at 220s, 240s. And we don't know what we're going to be at or where we're going to be at just months from now when the courts do open back up. Like I said, we know we have a number of cases pending. We've still held and still are holding guidelines and protocols of who's allowed into our jail. So it's not just a free-for-all, and I say free-for-all, that's in comparison to how we operated in the past of who came into our jail for arrest versus what we're using right now. So there's a number of things, and as we go through this, as the discussions continue, we're certainly prepared to bring our examples forward and have a discussion on every aspect.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you want to go back one slide again. If we were to not approve any of the new staffing, this would save us the $489,000. If we look at just the levy impact itself, that brings us from a 10.79% levy down to a 9.54. So it does have a positive impact as far as levy is concerned. Of the requests that are on the table right now, 57% of our total levy increase is public safety services itself. So they are asking for 57% of our total levy increase. Next in line is community services, which is asking for 16% increase, or 16% of the total levy increase. And then governance services is at 12.8% of the total levy increase, and then 10.5% for land services. The majority of our driver right now is public safety services, and the majority of that is coming from that revenue loss. So we gave them the directive that we were looking for that 5% levy increase, and this is what we got back after a few rounds of, we actually were higher than this at one point. We did work with departments to try and reduce this more, and this is what they have put forward thus far. So I guess at this point, we're kind of looking for what is the next steps that all of you would like us to take as far as, do we want to schedule further meetings to sit and go through each individual area, or do you want staff to go back and try and figure out how to get down to a particular percentage? Where would you like us to go?
Input? Kara has a thing or two to say.
So I just want to note, not to toot our own horns or anything, but just so you know, Community Services has gone through an exercise where we've reduced down to it's actually 4.99% levy. We were at 7%. And so while we are happy to continue to take a look at our reductions, as Nick mentioned, the majority of our increase comes from staffing costs, to which we even went through and reviewed staffing. And because we are quite lean in staffing, once we reduce staff or shift staff, that also impacts the levy, which then could potentially have a negative impact on the budget. So community services, at least, is a bit lean in where else we can reduce, but we're happy to be a part of whatever discussions you guys want us to be.
There is one more driver to the budget, or to the levy that I forgot to mention too. Next year is our 27 payroll year, so there is additional levy in there for that 27th payroll. The levy impact is just under $1 million for that, so that has a negative impact on us as well.
Once every 10 years, we have 27 payrolls in a given year, which is around $1 million.
So what's the good news, Nick?
It only happens once every 10 years.
We're not at 19%. That's the good news too.
I think we need to have additional discussions, and if that's bringing in SMT members together or separately, there's advantages and disadvantages of each one, but I think that we need to hear those rationales and the discussion that goes behind each one of them. Because of COVID and all the things that came about, even in a year when we were already struggling, I think that we're now faced with extreme circumstances to look at the 2021 budget. So I think that we really have to shake the tree to make sure that we're getting to where we need to be. And I hear that from lots of other counties, that this is unfortunate that we're in this position. It's like the perfect storm for us in Crow Wing County because of our fund balances and that. And I mean, we need to really look at this. So I think there has to be some hard discussions, some hard rationales brought to us for these positions. And so I think that we should schedule that however we have to do it. But I think we have to really get down, and I'll just end there.
Okay.
Sheriff?
If I may, we did a group discussion downstairs in Land Services a few years ago that I thought was very productive. Each group came forward and did a presentation and really had a chance to get into the weeds. And the questions not only came from commissioners, but also came from other SMT members, just for clarification and understanding. I would like to see us move to a format similar to that, and we have some time to prepare a very in-depth Q&A session. And I guess personally, what I'd like to see is if, with what little information you have right now, regardless of which division you're looking at, which department or office, if there's some questions out there, we can at least make sure that are highlighted, it would be appreciated.
And I know that took place in 2018, and I did attend that, and a couple of the other commissioners were there at the time. Is that a format that people like? I mean, we're the group that's going to make these decisions, all of us together. You guys are going to give us the rationales. You should be able to ask each other questions, the hard questions. This is not a time to be gentle, I don't believe. Respectful, but not gentle. And I think from our perspective that we should have that opportunity also to ask questions to justify some of these. This is, our original directive was somewhere between that 3% and 5% that we wanted to be at this levy. And we've taken some actions that perhaps we got the cart before the horse, and we're going to have to live with that. But I think that we need to now sit back and, to your point, Sheriff, we have that kind of meeting where we really flesh out all the issues that are required to get to a levy that we can all live with.
If that's
The only
direction we'd like
concern
to
I
go.
have is the social distancing, but we'll do that in the Land Services where it was done last time, and to the best of our ability, although that was just a horseshoe type setup in the tables, so, if we use both rooms, I think we can accommodate that social distancing factor.
There would be enough space if we wanted to do that. I mean, we can put 32 people in Land Services with both sides open with social distancing requirements at this point in time. So we would have space for that. The one thing I will say is that I believe many of our departments have gone through this type of an exercise. And if you look at, if I'm speaking strictly from administrative services standpoint right now, the 3% increase I have that's listed in there is essentially salaries and wages. So if I need to get lower than 3% of where I'm at this point in time, that is going to require me to lay off staff. And that's not in my plan at this point in time. I know you just heard from Community Services who had gone through that same type of exercise of what they are looking at there. There's no levy increase being asked for from the Highway Department. We're essentially talking about 3 areas that are driving the impact increase to the levy for this year. We can go through the whole full-blown presentation of everything again. Remember, you have to set your preliminary levy by September 30th, so we're going to also need to coordinate some calendars if we're talking about a full in-depth situation such as that type of a presentation.
So your recommendation would be not to do that? To send each of the departments back and the ones that are driving the cost to reevaluate?
I have no recommendation for you. That's your choice of how you want to do that. But they have been instructed with what the board's wishes were from the beginning of this process. Every SMT member was told that we're looking at a 5% levy. And if we're not going to achieve that, or if we're not going to work to get to that 5% levy, or if the department is not going to come back with where we're at with needing to make those changes, we need some direction from the board as far as what number are you going to be comfortable with? And if it's not 5%, what is that number going to be? And if it is 5%, then SMT members have some work that needs to be done.
And my recollection also was that we were gonna bring forward the budget that we deemed we had to bring forward. But there was discussion of a percentage that was listed on.
And we did, our initial budget submission was that budget, Scott, and then Tim tasked us with getting our budget down from that 7% to the 4.9%.
We just can't hear anybody that ain't at the mic.
And our budget, when we initially came in, was that budget that we thought was realistic, around the 7% increase. Then Tim tasked us with getting it down to the 4.99%, so we could fall within the lower levy per the board's direction. And while we are okay with the new budget submittal, it's pretty uncomfortable, and we will do our darndest if we're instructed to go lower than the 4.99. I'm not quite sure, but we did go through the exercise of the management team and Teresa cutting and adjusting elsewhere. As Debbie said, most of our expenses are personnel, so we're going to have to get really creative with what that's going to look like.
Land Services also went through this exercise trying to get to that 4.99%. The only way that they could get down there was substantial layoffs based on what Gary had presented to us. So we, at this point, left it with that 16.1% because we didn't feel comfortable that the layoffs he was putting in there to get below that 5% were realistic.
If I could add to that, Nick, to get below 5% for land services, that's 7 people, board you'd have to lay off. I think it's pretty short-sighted to pick on 2021 when I know there's been previous years where there's been huge increases to budgets and other departments did not have huge increases. So when I'll speak for land services, we are at also for the most part a salary and benefits. We definitely are banking on a retirement to keep our one request pretty much minimal on a levy impact, but to keep it at 1 year and have everybody now play by the same rules of 5%, I think is ridiculous, but I understand we're in a pandemic. But if you want land services, that's 7 people, and I know every commissioner knows where we're at as far as staffing.
So we're at the point of looking for some direction on where we want to go from here, whether that is further meetings, whether that's directing staff to get down to a particular percentage.
Well, I think the direction in the past has been to get down to that 5%. The areas that have achieved that, it's hard to put additional pressure on them to do more. I'm not sure what I think the answer is, to be honest. Laying off 7 people or not addressing some of the needs is going to be an issue.
Mr. Chair, I guess the thought that is in my mind is that we're going to have to just work with each of these, with senior management in each of these areas and try to do it on one-on-one and see what we can do, starting with the one that impacts the levy the most and work our way down. I think we got to look at the whole budget of those areas.
Are you looking at something?
I was just trying to figure out dollar amount wise that we're looking at. To get to a 5% levy increase, we need to cut about an additional $2 million off the levy of what is currently being proposed. That's what dollar amount that we would have to look at.
And roughly 2 million of that is what I would say is uncontrollable, which is the sheriff's office, between computers, contracts, increases, reduction in jail revenues, salary increases and benefits. Uncontrollable, you're sitting at 1.7 and change. You know, we had the contract for a great number of years. It was a great benefit. It was a cash cow, but in all reality, it's been sent to the slaughterhouse. And we all knew this day was going to come, and we're going to be faced with losing that contract. And it was very lucrative when we had 60 to 70 DOC inmates here. But it was something that's always been up there as an item that is going to be, there's going to be a light on it at one time. And when it hit, I guess it's conceivable to understand when we're all at the crossroads we are now with the pandemic and everything else hitting us at the same time. It's not surprising that that would hit, uniformly right along with it.
So we can do a line-by-line breakdown of different items within each department if that is beneficial for the board. If you would like to see more detail in each of the departmental budgets to look at it from that perspective, or we can look at putting together presentations from the departments to the board. What direction would you like us to move forward with?
I'd like each department to bring that forward to us.
Okay?
All right, we'll start coordinating with each department to pull together what is their drivers and what's going on in each department and start working to figure out when we can meet or if they can provide that to you and go from there.
So your next budget committee meeting is scheduled for September 10th, which is 2 weeks from now. If you want to have those proposals at that time, or do you want them before then?
At that time is fine.
Okay?
What's the date of our last board meeting? That's when we'll set our
September 22nd.
maximum.
Preliminary has to be set by September 22nd.
So SMT members, you all heard that for September 10th budget committee meeting, you need to have a presentation with all the line item details of what your 2021 budget entails. Listing out the increases and the changes that will be impacting your budget. Up to the board. I would suggest it's line items that have a impact, or material impact on what the budget is.
Right.
When you add all of our small variances, that comes up to
True. Yep, it's gonna be different for each department. That is scheduled for 9 o'clock on the 10th.
Yep.
And perhaps we'll see if we can do it in meeting room 1 and 2, if that's your wishes of what you want to do that way.
Yes,
That's your wishes, it won't be recorded.
right. So a quick question on that in terms of the open meeting law. If, at that meeting, the public could attend. So are we scheduling a meeting where they can't attend and we're not going to record? Are we violating the open meeting law?
And it's not so much recording, it's live streaming.
Okay,
So I don't know if that
Yeah,
makes
it's
a
not the
difference.
recording
I can
aspect of
record
it.
it for you with a
Right.
handheld recorder, but it won't be live streamed.
So we can do it here too, if that is the preference instead.
well, then I think we should do it here because the public should have access to what we're doing.
Okay?
All right, so next on the list for the agenda is a financial update. Cash flow wise, at the end of July, we were sitting at 14.4 million in available cash flow. This puts us about $500,000 to $750,000 higher than we were last July at this time. There is some artificial inflation in here. If we look at the fact that we received the 8 million for CARES, it actually puts our current available cash at 22, but that is restricted, so we didn't have anything set up to restrict that funding, so we're actually down to that 14.48. Where did I mess up there?
Do you need something up?
Nope. Budget-wise, get this machine to cooperate with me. For our levy-based funds, revenue side, we are up 12.2 million. A good portion of that is the 8 million that we received for CARES Act dollars. So that leaves us with approximately 4 million in increased revenues. We have about 1.3 million more than what we budgeted in property tax. Some increases in the state aid and the federal portion, mostly due to timing with Highway Department. On the expense side, we are currently at 102.41% of our budget, so we are to the bad by 1.2 million. Most of that is buried in highway with 2.9 million more than what was budgeted through the end of July in contractor fees for the CASA system and for the other systems. This is a timing piece. We do budget monthly, and it's a best guess as to when those expenses will actually hit, so those should correct by year end. Otherwise, overall, we are trending fairly close to where we plan to be at this point. Are there any questions on current financial position or any additional items?
So there's no major concerns at this point.
Not at this point. Still have a lot of year to go yet.
Always a snapshot in time. Okay.
Gary, are you still on the line?
Yep.
And maybe
Yeah, I'm here.
Jessica knows the answer too. Are you starting to see any kind of patterns or trends with the second half tax collections that we need to be aware of or concerned about?
I don't. I think Jessica was on here. I haven't even looked to see what's been started to trickle in. I haven't heard from, one of my barometers is when I start to hear from staff that we start getting payments stacking, right? That we're not keeping up on the daily intake, and I haven't heard that yet. So I don't believe that the mass payments or an uptick in payments probably have started yet. That would be my best guess.
Okay. Thanks.
Anything else?
That is everything I have for today.
Commissioners, anything from any of you?
No.
If this continues, I'll get hoarse being the only one talking. I appreciate everybody coming today. Not going to be a fun round of budgeting, I'm sure, but I appreciate all the hard work that is being done, has been done. And so with that, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.